Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. And many times at the beginning of these videos, I recall naming the series Freemasonry and Satanism. And I could have named it the Rosicrucians, the Kabbalist, Zionist, Lucifer, secret societies. And people say these things are not connected. But I beg to differ. And I think I have the proof. Incidentally, and ironically, in Series 200, Part 2, I made the second video on H P Blavatsky's Personal Memoirs of H P Blavatsky by Mary Neff, N-E-F-F. And it clearly said, as H P Blavatsky wrote in her letters to her family and others, that there were these entities that were taking over her body and bringing to the world this information with the Theosophist Society and instructing her what to do, creating the Theosophist Society. And I suppose that would include the Lucifer magazine they were publishing and the Lucifer publishing company they created, and a lot of other articles she wrote to newspapers, the Theosophist magazine, and so many books. The Series 100 in my series, ISIS Unveiled. This is Volume 2. I made Part 1. Today I'm going to make Part 2 from this big, thick book. So I'm thinking from Part 2 of Series 200, which is ironic. This is Series 200, and the Series 100 was ISIS Unveiled. That wasn't planned. Just thought that was interesting, how things work out. So Series 200, I'm still learning, and I'm reading from this book. If you haven't seen the video, watch it. Personal Memoirs of H P Blavatsky, 1937. Nice thick book. So somebody wrote a little biography about H P Blavatsky, and she clearly indicates that the beings who gave us volumes, if they were stacked up, it'd be something like this. Between the Secret Doctrine and ISIS Unveiled and so many other books. So apparently, my point is, apparently, according to her, and so much more, the information came from these masters, whether they were living humans, maybe in India, leaving their body, visiting her, and instructing her, or people who had deceased and who were from the beyond the veil, another dimension, Hades or hell, whatever you want to call it, were coming to H P Blavatsky and giving her directions. Angels, masters, demons, what are they? But I thought it would be interesting for me to go back and read some more from ISIS Unveiled, Series 100, after making Part 2, Series 200, the memoirs, knowing now that I know that the information came from some other world entities. So I was perusing the book and it was just blowing me away. So I thought I would pick, I guess I can only pick one thing to make a video on at a time. And between witchcraft and magic and the Freemasons, I've decided to make this video, the High Masons' Stricture upon Masonry. So I'm going to talk about Freemasonry and the other off topics that are in this. So it's interesting when you're reading stuff and they point out other things. If you are an alert reader, and using discernment, pay attention to the sentences, and you pick up a lot of tidbits of information. Like I said, the information to me is fascinating, and it answers a lot of questions. Even me, after creating over 400 videos, 600 hours, I'm up to 201 in the series, Freemasonry and Satanism, and 201 was the 200 book review, and 101 was the 100 book review. And it's taken me about 4.5 years to get where I am today making videos, since I started my research almost 15 years ago, 14 years ago, in 2005, when on a big zero birthday I went down to Costa Rica and sat at a tiki bar in Jaco Beach on the Pacific Ocean. And I was the only American sitting at the bar. And these foreigners told me they felt sorry for we Americans because we didn't know what was going on. Of course, I thought they were crazy, and I flew back to Florida, started looking up some of the things they were talking about, and lo and behold, they were correct. I had no idea, and that began my investigation in 2005, and of course this is 2018, June, and I'm here in the mountains of North Carolina on this Sunday afternoon. So let me read a little bit from this and see if you can pick up on the little tidbits of information that's quite amazing, revealing. So I'll start out on page 388. And they're talking about, in this connection, place may well be given to a letter from Mr. Charles Southern, corresponding secretary of the New York Liberal Club. You got to pay attention to the words right there. That jumped out at me. New York Liberal Club. Back in 1887, they had a New York Liberal Club. Of course, now we have transgenderism and the gay rainbow agenda and many other things, globalism, Agenda 21, and the efforts to destroy Christianity. And all that's touched on in this material I'm going to read from. So back in 1887, and a letter coming from a Charles Southern, corresponding secretary of the New York Liberal Club, which was received by us on the day after the date it bears. Mr. Southern is known as a writer and lecturer on antiquarian, ancient things, mystical, occult things. So ancient and occult, I sum it up by saying the word witchcraft so people get it clearly. Although I don't think all shamanism or spiritualism, like even in the Bible, Jesus casting out unclean spirits and demons, turning water into wine and taking one loaf of bread and turning it into baskets of bread, and a couple fish into baskets of fish to feed the multitude of people that are sitting there listening to Jesus. Jesus didn't want them to go hungry. And so much prophesizing that he would say something that would happen, or up ahead of the road there'll be a donkey, go get it and bring it to me. And his disciple goes up the street and gets the donkey, and there it is. So I'm not so opposed to what some people would call magic. I am opposed to the secret societies and the elites who rule our world, suppressing the knowledge, and a lot of effort has gone through to suppress it. I'm sure millions, if not more, people have been murdered. Library of Alexandria was destroyed. Even the Vatican, when they sent the conquistadors or the explorers to Central South America, they would confiscate the Aztec or the Mayans' gold and go get the Shama, the witch doctor, if you will, and get his artifacts and his knowledge and proceed to kill him. So somebody didn't want that mystical, magic, occult, witchcraft knowledge out there for the general population. So it might behoove the rest of us to say, well, what the heck is it, Rick? And what's it got to do with all the mystical and satanic symbolism we see today in the mainstream media, movies, Emmys, Grammys, Super Bowl halftime shows, tunnel openings, and all kinds of other events. American Idol program, Eurovision, which is the Europe version of the American Idol program, a goat on the Hoover Dam, Shiva, the goddess of destruction, Kali on the Empire State Building, a big projection. When the Supreme Court passed legislation saying that states could not ban gay marriage, the rainbows were projected onto state buildings and major other buildings and huge bridges all over the country. They went through a lot of effort for that celebration. Why? So we're getting a letter back in 1887, or whatever date is here, 1877, from a Charles Southern, just putting this into context, corresponding secretary of the New York Liberal Club. Mr. Southern is known as a writer and lecturer on antiquarian, mystical, and other subjects, so ancient and mystical occult. In Masonry, he has taken so many of the degrees as to be competent authority as regards the craft. He is 32, A and RP 94, Memphis, KR, looks like a Malta symbol, K Kodash, MM 104. So all these different lodges or secret societies, he's a member of that many. He is also an initiate of the modern English Brotherhood. We hear that word brotherhood a lot. The Arab Brotherhood and so much more. Even George Bush Jr. belonging to the Skull and Bones, the Brotherhood in the university that he went to. John Kerry belonging to the Brotherhood. Council of Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberger Groups, Bohemian Grove, and so many more. So that's who this guy was. So he was also the English Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross and other secret societies, and that's the word that's used here, and Masonic editor of the New York Advocate in 1877. A lot going on. And it seems like they've been plowing forward with this philosophy and efforts to change the planet, humanity, for 1877, 1977, 2018, clearly 150 years plus. And from what I know, the Zionists who wanted the Palestinians' land, who created the Illuminati in 1776, ironically the same year that the United States declared independence from Britain, 1776. So that's 1876, 1976, 2076. 250, 260 years. These people have been aspiring to create the state of Israel, and the Jews are definitely involved with Masonry, as it says in this material I'm about to read. They were responsible for scheming and bringing about the French Revolution, and from my research, World War I, World War II, appears 911, and so much more, and it's looming in our future. Some catastrophe or World War III martial law, where this new age, this globalism will be forced on the world. That's a lot to say. So he's also an initiate of the modern English Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross and other secret societies, and Masonic editor of the New York Advocate. Following is a letter which we place before the Masons, as we desire that they should see what one of their own number has to say. And again, I repeat, this is Isis Unveiled, and in that other book I just showed you, H P Blavatsky's memoirs, the information she got from these books, the one I'm holding, it clearly says it in here in her letters, that she got this from some masters, some beings that were not materialized human beings. And they would appear like ghosts or voices or images and bring before her eyes ancient manuscripts is where she got all this information, or dictate other information. And there were numerous of these entities that did that. And apparently they even gave her information, as this book says, on Freemasonry and so much more. Because Helena Blavatsky did not know all of this stuff, and she admits it. So some kind of interdimensional, invisible ghost, remote viewing, deceased entities, angels, masters, whatever you want to call them, demons. And if they are angels, are they fallen angels? Remember, it was Helena Blavatsky, apparently at the command of these entities, who created the Lucifer magazine. And then I get comments from people telling me, well, Lucifer really isn't the bad one. God is the bad one. Satan's not really the bad one. God is the bad one. Satan and Lucifer and the Freemasons are all trying to bring us the light. What are we to believe? And the light is the Rainbow Coalition. Liberalism. So I guess when we do have this world revolution, that'll be the battle. God-fearing, conservative people who do not want to break the Ten Commandments versus the people who want to be progressive and liberal and say there is no God and there are no commandments, you should do as thou wilt. Is that going to be the cosmic battle on planet Earth? Has it been going on for a long time? So when you remember all of what I just said when I read this letter, it just makes for interesting pondering, thinking. And that's what my videos are. Just a conversation for people who want to think. So anyways, this guy was the corresponding secretary of the New York Liberal Club, plus a high-degree Freemason, and so many other brotherhood organizations, even the Rosy Cross, editor of the New York Advocate magazine or newsletter. Here we go. In response to your letter, he's writing to a Mr. Joseph Mazzini, which interestingly enough, Albert Pike of the Freemasons wrote to Mazzini back in the 1877 period, a letter detailing that 3 world wars would be required. You can go look that up, to bring about this new world order. About the same time this letter was written. And when I saw it was to Mr. Mazzini of Italy, I said, oh my, that must be the same Mazzini that Albert Pike wrote that letter to, detailing the 3 world wars that would bring about the New World Order. And the first 2, who would be fighting those wars, and apparently they were on target. And the third one will be something to do with Gog and Magog and Israel, and it looks like that's on target. And part of prophecy is when Damascus in Syria falls, that's when the whole end begins. World destruction. Then, of course, they play with this thing called the Phoenix Rising. And the myth there is, in order for the new world to evolve and grow into this beautiful world, the old world has to burn up in ashes, burst into flames, be totally destroyed so that the new can be born. Even in the American Idol, the Eurovision 2014 contest, singing contest in Europe, Conchita Wurst, with the head like Jesus and the body of a woman in a silky dress, go look it up, Eurovision 2014. The winning song was The Phoenix Rising, and the words in that song are, "You can't stop us." It all ties together. So this guy says, I willingly furnish the information desired with respect to the antiquity and present condition of Freemasonry. This I do the more cheerfully since we belong to the same secret societies, and you can thus better appreciate the necessity for the reserve which at times I shall be obliged to exhibit. You rightly refer to the fact that Freemasonry, no less than the effect theologies of the day, has its fabulous history to narrate. Clogged up as the order has been by the rubbish and dirt of absurd biblical legends, like I said, you pay attention to these words and you can see what this writer of the New York Liberal Club and the high-level Freemason and all these other brotherhoods, they think of Christianity, as I've been saying, and even during the early 1900s when they had the communist hearings after World War I, the communists said one of the goals was to infiltrate all aspects of our society and destroy Christianity. That's communist. And says here, in drift of absurd biblical legends, it is no wonder that if its usefulness has been impaired and its work as a civilizer hampered. Fortunately, the great anti-Masonic excitement that raged in the United States during a portion of this century forced considerable band of workers to delve into the true origin of the craft. So this would have been in the 1800s. At that time, there was a huge amount of anti-Masonic excitement in the United States. And ex-president John Quincy Adams, I made a book review on his book, talks about back then the two political parties in the United States during the 1800s were the Mason Party and the Anti-Mason Party. And the Anti-Mason Party were generally Christians, Catholics, and the Masonic Party were anti-Christian, anti-Catholic, Protestants fighting the church. Funny how you can connect the dots. So because of the anti-Masonic excitement that raged in the United States during the 1800s, forced a considerable band of workers, a lot of people, to write a lot of books and investigate, to delve into the true origin of the craft, and bring about a healthier state of things. The agitation in America also spread to Europe, and the literary effects of Masonic authors on both sides of the Atlantic, such as Rebold, Fendel, Heenman, Mitchell, Mackenzie, Helg, Yacker, and others well known to the fraternity, is now a matter of history. And I've been making book reviews on these different topics, and I will continue to do so. One effect of their labors has been, in a general measure, to bring the history of Masonry into the open daylight, where even its teachings, jurisprudence, and ritual are no longer secret from those of the profane who have the wit to read as they run. So we people who are not initiated into these secret societies they call profane, and the Jewish people, not all Jewish people of course, but the ones who speak unkindly of non-Jews, calling us goy or goyim, which means cattle. And from my material, apparently they believe non-Jews don't have souls. So they think we're goyim, or cattle, and of course they call us Gentiles. So there is a separation there, clearly, Jews and Gentiles, as even mentioned in the Bible. And the Masons, it's the Masons and those people who are initiated into the Illuminati, the illumined ancient mystery religion, call the rest of us profane. So I pay attention to these words in these books. You are correct in saying that the Bible is the great light of European and American Masonry. So I thought that was kind of odd that this guy would be saying that the Bible is the great light of Masonry. And it also says in this letter, or in the material I've been reading here the last couple days, that if you're in India, for example, they don't have the Christian Bible in the Freemason Lodge. They would have the maybe the Quran, the Torah of the Arabs. So whatever country they're in, that's the Bible they use and swear on. So why this says here, you are correct in saying that the Bible is the great light of European and American Masonry. In consequence to this, the theistic conception of God, so the philosophy of God, and the biblical cosmology have been ever considered two of its great cornerstones. So I suspect maybe what they're talking about the Bible is the Old Testament. And the Jews that I've read about, not all Jews of course, not all Jews reject Jesus, but I've read material where a lot of Jews say the Old Testament applies to us, not the New Testament. That applies to the Gentiles. So two different theologies, the Old Testament and the New Testament. So apparently that's what the Freemasons are talking about here, this author, when they say the Bible is the great light. So the ancient stories of the Old Testament, some of them quite horrific, apparently is the great light of European and American Masonry. Its chronology seems also to have been based upon the same pseudo-revelation. Thus, Dr. Dalco, in one of his treatises, asserts that the principles of the Masonic order were presented at and coeval with the creation. It is therefore not astonishing that such a pundit should go on to state that God was the first Grand Master. So they're saying God was the first Grand Master of Freemasonry. Adam, of Adam and Eve, Adam was the second Grand Master, and the last named initiate, Eve, into the great mystery. As I suppose many a priestess of Cybele and Lady Kodash were afterward, so they were Grand Masters. The Reverend Dr. George Oliver, another Masonic authority, gravely records what may be termed the minutes of a lodge, where Moses presided as Grand Master, Joshua as Deputy Grand Master, Elohab and Bezalel as Grand Wardens. So all these characters in the Old Testament were Grand Masters and Grand Wardens of Freemasonry. I remember again, this material that H P Blavatsky wrote came from these interdimensional beings, or even people who were in India and other parts of the world, who were out of their body traveling. And later on in life, when she traveled to India, she met these characters face to face, along with some other people that belonged to the Theosophist Society, like Colonel Oakart, etc. The temple at Jerusalem, here we go with the creation of Israel after World War II, which it took the Zionist Jewish people 300 years to bring about. And strangely enough, a few months ago, President Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Everything is moving according to their plan. The temple at Jerusalem, which recent archaeologists have shown to be a structure with nothing like the pretended antiquity of its erection, and incorrectly called after a monarch whose name proves his mystical character. So that would, of course, be King Solomon. And they break the word here into SOL-OM-ON. Sol, S-O-L, is another word for the sun. I guess Om, is another word for the sun. And On is another word for the sun. And it says here in this book, the name of the sun in 3 languages. Solomon. I didn't know that. Plays, as you correctly observe, a considerable share in the Masonic mystery. Such fables as these and the traditional Masonic colonization of ancient Egypt have given the craft the credit of an illustrious origin to which it has no right. So ancient Egypt, they're saying, was the origin of Freemasonry, and they're saying here that they don't have the right to that. And before whose 40 centuries of legendary history, the mythologies of Greece and Rome fade into insignificance. The Egyptian, the Chaldean, and other theories necessary to each fabricator of the high degrees have also each had their short period of prominence. The last axe to grind has consecutively been the fruitful mother of unproductiveness. We both agree, remember this is Mr. Southern, Charles Southern, to this Mazzini character in Italy, two top-level Freemasonry leaders. And there were back then in the 1800s, the rage that was across the United States and Europe. What happened was, one was the murder of Henry Morgan, who divulged the secrets of Freemasonry, and it was a big conspiracy across the United States. And another incident was a Freemasonic courier in Germany, the Bohemian area. Lightning struck him on his horse, I think. How fortuitous was that? Because when the police showed up and checked his pouch, they found some plan for a new world order, takeover of all governments, and that caused all over Europe a huge shutdown of all the Freemasonic lodges. So there were several incidences where their plans had been leaked to the public, and the whole of the United States or the whole of Europe were against Freemasonry. And then when you read this and you see how they put it into such positive light, that even God was a grand Mason. We both agree that all the ancient priesthoods had their esoteric doctrines. So all the ancient priesthoods had esoteric doctrines and secret ceremonies, and a lot of those secret ceremonies was sacrificing humans. Kabbalists, many times for 2,000 years, Jews all across Europe were accused of abducting humans and draining the blood and sacrificing them in different rituals, blood Passover or whatever. Quite bizarre. I've made videos on these topics. The Mayans and sacrificing people and their pyramids and serpent symbols. In India, they would sacrifice people, serpent symbols. Egypt shows many sacrifices in the hieroglyphics etched in stone. From the Essenic Brotherhood, the evolution of the Hindu Gymsophist doubtless preceded the Solidites of Greece and Rome as described by these so-called pagan writers. Founded on these and copying them in the matter of ritual, signs, grips, and passwords, etc., were developed the medieval guilds, lodges, secret groups. Like the present livery companies of London, the relics of the English trade guilds, these secret trade organizations, the operative Masons were but a guild of workmen with higher pretensions. From the French name Macon, derived from the mas, an old Norman noun meaning a house, comes our English Mason or house builder. As the London companies alluded to present now and again, the freedom of deliveries to outsiders, so we find the trade guilds of Masons doing the same. Thus the founder of Ashmolean Museum was made free of the Masons at Warrington in Lancashire, England, and on the 16th October 1646, The entrance of such men as Elias Ashmole into the operative fraternity paved the way for the great Masonic Revolution of 1717. Would speculative Masonry come into existence? The Great Masonic Revolution of 1717. This is 2018. You suppose they're finished yet? They're going to have their global world order? As far as I'm concerned, the past 10 years, they've been microchipping children and much more. The constitutions of 1723, this would be the Freemasonic Constitution, and 1738 by the Masonic impostor Anderson were written up for the newly fledged and first Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons of England, from which body all others over the world hail today. Free and accepted. Back then, and when I was driving around Maine, I noticed they had these circular blue signs beside the road everywhere that said Freemasonry on top, and on the bottom, ancient and accepted. So make no mistake, this is real stuff. These bogus constitutions written by Anderson were compiled about then, and in order to palm off his miserable rubbish, like clip history of the craft, he had the audacity to state that nearly all the documents relating to Masonry in England had been destroyed by the 1717 reformers. Happily, in the British Museum, Boleyn Library, and other public institutions, Rybold, Hahn, and others, have discovered significant evidence in the shape of an old operative Masonic charges to dispute this statement. So during the 1700s and 1800s, there was a lot of opposition to Freemasonry, and apparently said they had a revolution and revamped everything or redirected their goals, and he's saying that that's not true. The same writers, I think, have conclusively upset the tenability, sorry about some of these words, tenability of two other documents palmed upon Masonry, namely the spurious Charter of Cologne in 1535, and the forged questions, supposed to have been written by Lalande, the antiquary from which the manuscript of King Henry the Sixth of England, in the last named, Pythagoras is referred to having formed a great lodge. So another famous ancient historical character, Pythagoras, is having formed a great lodge at Crotona and made many masons, some of whom traveled into France, and there made many, from whence in process of time the art passed into England. So if there's anything to be said here, this is no small thing. Sir Christopher Wren, architect of St. Paul's Cathedral, London, often called the Grand Master of Freemasons, was simply the master or president of the London Operative Mason Company. The London Operative Mason Company. If such a tissue of fable could be interwove itself into the history of the Grand Lodges, which now have charge of the first three symbolic degrees, it is hardly astonishing that the same fate should befall nearly all of the high Masonic degrees, which have been aptly termed an incoherent medley of opposite principles. Had to move my camera. Sun was burning me up. You can see the view behind me, my house here. Out here in the country, in the mountains of North Carolina. Back to the book, page 390. It is curious to note, too, that most of the bodies which work these, such as the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, and the Rite of Avion, and the Order of the Temple, Fezler's Rite, the Grand Council of the Emperors of the East and West, Sovereign Prince Masons, etc., etc. That's what it says here. Are nearly all the offspring of the sons of Ignatius Loyola. So all of these Freemasonic lodges and brotherhoods and organizations were the offspring of the sons of Ignatius Loyola. Wasn't Ignatius Loyola the creator of the Jesuits? Don't we now? Pope Francis was a Jesuit. Aren't the Jesuits the warriors or assassins for the church? The creators of these brotherhoods? The Baron Hunt and Chevalier Ramsey, Toshidi, I'm saying these names wrong, I'm sure, Zenendorf, and numerous others who founded the grades in these rites, the different grades, different degrees, worked under instructions from the general of the Jesuits. That's what it says here. Talk about connecting dots. In the ISIS Unveiled book by Helena Blavatsky, and apparently the information was dictated to her by invisible beings who commanded her to do all this, the secret doctrine, ISIS Unveiled. This is only volume 2. Huge book. I got to get volume 1. And I'm only reading a couple pages here, but everything I read in this book is unbelievable. But remember, using discernment, you can't read this book and say this is gospel, this is truth. Not from a group of people who created Lucifer magazine. But it is interesting to see what they're trying to get people to believe and what they think. So you got to look for the holes in this work. And one of the things that you can see clearly is these brotherhoods, lodges, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, Knights of the Garter, the Queen of England and her family, the Knights of the Garter, Bohemian Grove in California, Bilderberger groups, Trilateral Commissions, Council of Foreign Relations, and so much more are all these secret organizations and brotherhoods apparently working to control the planet. It's their planet, so I guess they would have us believe, not ours. And apparently they're planning on a depopulation event, like they probably did in World War I and World War II and revolutions and other events throughout history, bringing communism to China, and of course 40, 50, maybe more millions killed in the 1900s in South America, Central America, 1800s, 1700s, how many American Indians were destroyed? So more, etc., etc., throughout history, repeated and repeated and repeated. Unbelievable conversation. So they were under the instructions of the general of the Jesuits, the nest where these high degrees were hatched. And no Masonic rite is free from their baneful influence, more or less, was the Jesuit College of Clermont at Paris. That bastard foundling of Freemasonry, the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, so he's calling that a bastard foundling, which is unrecognized by the Blue Lodges. And remember, this book was written in 1877. And these beings were dictating this information to Helena Blavatsky, calling the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite a bastard foundling. So it was created, and they called it a bastard, which would be a fatherless child. Which is unrecognized by the Blue Lodges was the enunciation primarily of the brain of the Jesuit Cavalier Ramsay. It was brought by him to England in 1736 to 38 to aid the cause of the Catholic Stuarts. The rite in its present form of the 33 degrees was recognized at the end of the 18th century by some half-dozen Masonic adventurers at Charleston, South Carolina. So, of course, the 18th century would be the 1700s. That used to always keep me off guard thinking, saying 18th century, not putting that together with 1700 to 1799. Just like the 20th century was the 1900s. But maybe that doesn't annoy other people, but I don't like to be misled. So during the 1700s, the half a dozen Masonic adventurers at Charleston, South Carolina, and I believe at Charleston, South Carolina, they have a huge statue of Albert Pike. It's supposed to be one heck of a headquarter location for Freemasonry. So I need to go to Charleston. I've been there once just as a tourist, seeing the downtown market, staying at the Holiday Inn. But I need to spend some serious time in the downtown area looking at the historic buildings and monuments. I'll bet it would be interesting. Two of these, Perlet, a tailor, and a dancing master named Lecorne, were fitting predecessors for a later resuscitation by a gentleman of the name Gorgias, employed in the aristocratic occupation of a ship's clerk on a boat trading between New York and Liverpool, Britain probably. Dr. Crufix, alias Goss, the inventor of certain patent medicines of an unobjectable character, ran the institution in England. The powers under which these worthies acted was a document claimed to have been signed by Frederick the Great at Berlin on May 1st, 1786. May 1st. Isn't that May Day? It's supposed to be a significant cult holiday. And by which were revised the Masonic Constitution and status of the high degrees of the ancient and accepted rite. This paper was an impudent forgery and necessitated the issuing of a protocol by the Grand Lodge of the Three Globes at Britain, the Grand Lodges of the Three Globes at Berlin, which conclusively proved the whole arrangement to be false in every particular. On claims supported by this superstitious documents, the ancient and accepted rite have swindled their confiding brothers in the Americas and Europe out of thousands of dollars, to the shame and discredit of humanity. The modern Templars, whom you refer to in your letter, are but a mere magpies in the peacock's plumes. The aim of the Masonic Templars is the secularization, to secularize, make it not religious, sectarianation, or rather the Christianizing of Masonry, a fraternity which is supposed to admit the Jew, the Farsi, I guess that would be people from Iran, the Mohammedans, the Buddhist. In fact, every religionist within its portals who accepts the doctrine of a personal God and a spirit immortality. So that's what he's saying that all these lodges are supposed to do. But he's saying the bastard lodge, the Scottish Rite, hijacked all the rules. According to the belief of a section, if not all, of the Israelites, belonging to the craft in America, Templarism is Jesuitism. Templarism is Jesuitism. And I've shown pictures, and you can go look it up. The Freemasons making plenty of models of King Solomon's temple. That's why they call it Templarism. So to the Freemasons, the King Solomon's temple is very important, and they are apparently supporting rebuilding King Solomon's temple, which has a lot of components to the end of the world as we know it, philosophy, prophecy, theology, plans for globalism. It seems strange now that the belief in a personal God is becoming extinct. That's what it says here on page 390. It seems strange now that the belief in a personal God is becoming extinct. 1877. And that even the theologian has transformed his deity into an indescribable nondescript, that there are those who stand in the way of a general acceptation of the sublime pantheism of the primal Orientals of Jacob Boehme of Spienza. Often in the Grand Lodge, the subordinate lodges of this or other jurisdictions, the old doxasty is sung, the old religion is sung, with its praise, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, to the distrust of the Israelites and free-thinking brethren who are thus unnecessarily insulted. I think I need to read that again. So in the often in the Grand Lodge and subordinate lodges of this and other jurisdictions, the old doxology is sung. So the old religion, doxology, dogmaology, is sung with its praise, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, to the distrust of the Israelites and free-thinking brethren who are thus unnecessarily insulted. This could never occur in India, where the great light in a lodge may be the Quran, the Zen Avesta, or one of the Vedas. So in India, like I said at the beginning of this video, they didn't have a Christian Bible. They would have the Quran of the Arabs, or the Zen Avesta of the Farsis, or one of the Vedas of the Indian Hindu religion in the lodges. The sectarian Christian spirit in Masonry must be put down. Mail truck drove by on Sunday. Anyways, repeating the sentence I just said on page 390, the sectarian Christian spirit in Masonry must be put down. Today there are German Grand Lodges which will not allow Jews to be initiated. 1877. And apparently some master beings were dictating this information to H P Blavatsky, commanding her to write this book, Isis Unveiled. This is just one of many topics in this book. But it says here, the sectarian Christian spirit in Masonry must be put down. Today there are German Grand Lodges which will not allow Jews to be initiated, or Israelites from foreign countries to be accepted as brethren within their jurisdiction. The French Masons have, however, revolted against this tyranny, and the Grand Orient of France does now permit the atheist and materialist to the fellowship in the craft. So now they're saying the atheist can join the craft and the materialist. What are we to believe? A standing rebuke upon the claimed universality of Masonry is the fact that the French brethren have now repudiated. And remember, it was the French who brought us the Statue of Liberty from the Freemasons there. So I'm sure there is a serious occult significance to that, as well as the obelisk across the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., or the big obelisk in front of the Vatican, and the obelisk in every city downtown square in front of the courthouse. Like I said, this is no small thing. Notwithstanding its many faults, the speculative Masonry is but human, and therefore fallible. There is no institution which has done so much and is yet capable of such great undertakings in the future for human, religious, and political improvement. In the last century, get this letter has a lot of information. In the last century, the Illuminati taught peace with the cottage, war with the palace, throughout the length and breadth of Europe. So in the 1700s, in the last century, the Illuminati, that's the word that's here, taught peace with the cottage, war with the palace, throughout the length and breadth of Europe. So that was going on in the 1700s. And the head of the Illuminati apparently is the Rothschild family, which controlled the banking of the world. They were the ones who took over the United States money supply in 1913. In December 21st, another winter solstice, an occult significant time, when the sun reaches its most southerly portion, making it cold in the north. And of course, in the middle of summer is where it goes to the furthest north in the northern hemisphere. The summer solstice are important dates. And then, of course, the equinoxes are when it crosses the center point going each way. The sun goes all the way to the south. The winter solstice. Halfway equinox, important occult holiday. To the north, the summer solstice, occult holiday. And back to the middle again, the fall equinox, another occult holiday, and back to the south again. So they do a lot of these occult events days before Christmas. So anyways, December 21st, they conspired while all the congressmen were on vacation in America and created and planned for the Federal Reserve, giving the control of the USA money supply to these Rothschilds, these Illuminati. I've made videos on this topic. It's fairly plain that that's true and correct. There's many books on it. But anyways, what is interesting is in June of the following year, 1914, is when World War I began. And during World War I, this was one attempt to bring the world under one global order with the League of Nations. And with the Balfour Agreement, the Zionist Jews had conspired to try to get the Palestinians land. But all that failed, so they had World War II, and then the United Nations, and then they got the Palestinians land. And then, of course, with 9/11, they've been destroying all the countries in the Middle East, plus so much more. Since 1913, when the Illuminati banksters, Zionist Rothschilds took over the USA money supply, they crashed the system 7, 8, 9 times here in the United States, causing major depressions and recessions, basically being able to steal all the wealth from we the people in the United States. They're taking billions and billions, maybe trillions every year. They're holding us hostage with our own money, using it to take over the world, and then putting the tab on the U.S. taxpayers. And they plan on breaking this nation. If you believe Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the current Prime Minister of Israel, please go look up what Benjamin Netanyahu said in Fink's Bar. Or Prime Minister Sharon, in a heated argument in the Congress in Israel, screamed out, "Don't worry about America. We control America, and the Americans know it." Then weeks later, he went into a coma. I guess they didn't want him to have to explain that. And of course, one of the exposers of all this was President John Kennedy, and we saw what happened to him and so many others. In the last century, back to this book, page 391, the United States was freed from the tyranny of the mother country by the action of the secret societies more than is commonly imagined. So they're saying the Freemasons helped the United States break free of Britain's control, and they're calling it secret societies, and more than is commonly imagined. Washington, Lafayette, Franklin, Jefferson, Hamilton were Masons. And I have no doubt that's true. And I do know they had their own aims to take over the country and fool the Americans into thinking we were free. It's like a big tennis game. You bat the ball back and forth. We get a Republican president, we get a Democratic president. We get a Republican president, we get a Democratic president. And we keep the people in the United States, and probably the same kind of thing is going on all over the world, everybody battling each other, different parties, while they're laughing all the way to the bank. And in the 19th century, it was the Grand Master Garibaldi. So during the 1800s, it was the Grand Master Garibaldi, 33 degrees, who unified Italy, working in accordance with the spirit of the faithful brotherhood. So we're tying the brotherhood with the Illuminati here, no doubt about that, the ones who financed and helped create Israel. So that's Zionist Judaism, with the Jesuits in this material, with the Rosicrucians in this material, with the Freemasons and all kinds of other brotherhoods on this letter, as the Masonic, or rather Carbiani, principles of liberty, equality, humanity, independence, unity, taught for years by Brother Joseph Mazzini, the man that Albert Pike wrote the letter to, that was in the British Museum for years. Now, a lot of people say the letter really didn't exist. But ironically, the world wars were fought between the parties as described in that material. And the last world war is in the letter and who it's going to be fought against. And apparently Israel is in the heart of that disastrous situation. Speculative Masonry has much, too, within its ranks to do. One is to accept women as a co-worker of man in the struggle of life. Isn't that interesting? Because Illuminati leader Rockefeller said to one of the that famous movie producer, Aaron Russo, in that video you can go watch, that the reason that they brought women's rights to the table, in other words, brought about the whole issue of women's rights, was to get the women into the workforce and tax them. Rockefeller told this to Aaron Russo, and I have the video on that. And also to get the children free from the parental control into the school system. And Rockefeller was trying to get Aaron Russo to join him. And Aaron Russo told him, he said, "Rockefeller, don't you have enough money?" And Rockefeller told Aaron Russo, "Why do you care about people? Why don't you just worry about yourself?" You got to use your discernment on these issues and see where this letter from this person that belongs to the New York Liberal Club and a high degree Freemason and a member of many other Brotherhood organizations I mentioned here. He has a 32, an A, an RP, 94, Memphis, KR, Malta, Kodash, MM, all these organizations, 104. He is also an initiate into the Modern English Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross and other secret societies, and the Masonic editor of the New York Advocate. And apparently these beings, these masters, told Helena Blavatsky to put this information in this book. They said, go get this letter. Put this letter in the book. And I found it. So then it says here, to get women as the co-worker of man in the struggle of life. So they keep everybody at wit's end trying to make money and pay the bills. They don't want people thinking. I remember when I started this investigation years ago, and I started talking to personal, influential friends of mine who apparently knew more about reality than I did. They would tell me, they said, Rick, you got too much time on your hands. You shouldn't be paying attention to this stuff. They don't want us to pay attention to this stuff. As to the Hungarian Masons have done lately in initiating the Countess Haldeck into the Masons, another important thing is also to recognize practicality, the brotherhood of all humanity, by refusing none on accord of the color, race, position, and creed. Wow, that's a big issue these days. And look at that, it's part of the Masons' goal, and they want to destroy Christianity, as it said here. And they now, and this guy's talking about allowing atheists. And 1877. The dark-skinned should not be only theoretically the brother of the light. The colored Masons, who have been duly and regularly raised, stand at every lodge door in America craving admission, and they are refused. And there is South America to be conquered to the participation in the duties of humanity. The duties of humanity. If Masonry be, as claimed, a progressive, notice these words, science and a school of pure religion, it should ever be found in the advance guard of civilization and not in the rear. If it be but the empirical effort, a crude attempt of humanity to solve some of the deepest problems of the race, and no more than it must give place for fitter successors, perchance one of those of you, and I know of one that may have acted the prompter at the side of the chiefs of the order during its greatest triumphs, whispering to them, as the daemon did in the ears of Socrates, yours most sincerely, Charles Southern. So some interesting material in that letter. I thought reading it, I said, oh my, and who it was from. So I'll read a little bit more from this book and try to fit in my 2 hours that I normally make my videos. Here from the mountains of North Carolina. That's the north view of the valley here. Before I read on, I was reading from page 57. I put these little blue tabs in here when I'm reading, and I highlight my material. And the material was unbelievably horrible. It says here on page 57, in the latter part of the 16th century, there was hardly a parish to be found in which the priest did not study magic. And alchemy. the practice of exorcism to cast out devils in imitation of Christ, who, by the way, never used exorcism at all, led the clergy to devote themselves openly to sacred magic in contradistinction to black art, of which latter crime were accused all those who were neither priests nor monks. There was some other stuff here I was reading. I'll make a video on that material. But unbelievably horrific things these people were doing in this book. Like I said, there's so many topics in ISIS Unveiled. Not just Freemasonic information or connecting it to King Solomon's Temple, connecting that to the current Israel and the 911 and all the wars going on, including the war in Syria. And the Syrians are being murdered, as well as many other people all over the Middle East right now. And preparations apparently being made, according to lots of videos, for a global world order. And they could bring down the stock market on Monday and declare martial law or explode a nuclear missile in some city. Who knows what they'll do, or release a plague and depopulate the planet. But apparently these people are planning for something which is part of prophecy that they are trying to bring about. And all I can do is read these pages, and people can have a conversation, think about it, try to figure out where they stand. I stand with believing in Jesus, and that we should not try to do evil things, not the philosophy of do as thou wilt, as the progressives and the New World Order people, New Age, are trying to tell people. To do whatever you want to do, manifest your reality. There's no laws, there's no rules. Who should stand between what you and what you want to do? I think there's one guy running for congressman in Virginia who's in admitted pedophilia. People are accepting this stuff. They're bringing us this progressive world order that was mentioned in this letter. The de-Christianization of the country. Page 391, off the letter now. More from the book here. Thus falls to ruins the grand epic poem of Masons, sung by so many mysterious knights, as another revealed gospel. As we see, the Temple of Solomon is being undermined and brought to the ground by its own chief master masons of this century. And if you go on Yahoo image site and put in there Freemasons and King Solomon's Temple, you'll see all these pictures where all these Freemasonic lodges across the world and the country have built all these models and are supporting this brought about prophesied event of the return of Israel, which is supposed to bring about the destruction of Israel and much of the world with the return of an Antichrist, and that will bring about the return, second coming of Jesus. So somebody wants to bring this about. So isn't it so weird that some of these Zionist Christian organizations are supporting Israel, knowing full well that the plan is to have it destroyed, but they want to bring about some kind of prophecy? Kind of twisted thinking as far as I'm concerned. But let me read on. But if, following the ingenious exoteric description of the Bible, there are yet Masons who persist in regarding it as once an actual structure. So they're trying to say the King Solomon's Temple was not an actual structure. Who, of the students of the esoteric doctrine, not to be confused with the exoteric, the physical doctrine, or the esoteric, the occult, mystical doctrine, will ever consider this mythic temple otherwise than an allegory embodying the secret science. So what's the secret science? It's witchcraft, sorcery, but they like to call it secret science. Whether or not there ever was a real temple of that name, we may well leave that to archaeologists to decide. Well, archaeologists have figured out that there was a King Solomon's temple, and they've been digging all over the Middle East and Iraq and seizing all the artifacts from the museums in Iraq and other areas. These people behind all this mystery religion, bringing about globalisms, are digging like dogs for a bone, trying to find some secret artifacts. As prophesied, in the end times, the secrets will be discovered. Whether or not there ever was a real temple of that name, we may well leave to archaeologists to decide. But that the detailed description thereof in 1 Kings is purely allegorical. No serious scholar, proficient in the ancient as well as the medieval jargon of the Kabbalist and the alchemist, can doubt. The building of the Temple of Solomon is the symbolic representation of the gradual acquirement of the secret wisdom of magic. That's what it says here. The erection and development of the spiritual from the earthly, the manifestation of the power and splendor of the spirit of the physical world, although the wisdom and genius of the builder, the latter, when he has become an adept, someone who gets initiated into these organizations, is a mightier king than Solomon himself, the emblem of the sun, or light himself. So who's the light bearer? That would be Lucifer. And Lucifer is supposed to be Satan. The light of the real subjective world, shining in the darkness of the objective universe. This is the temple, which can be reared without the sound of a hammer or any tool of iron being heard in the house while it is in the building. So bringing about this new world order, this new age enlightenment, is allegorically their idea of rebuilding King Solomon's temple. They're saying in 1877 that, no, we're not going to really rebuild King Solomon's temple. Meanwhile, the battle rages on over there in Israel over the temple location. One of the problems, of course, is the Dome of the Rock, a major religious location for the Arabs, the Muslims, the people into the Quran, has to be taken down because apparently it's on the site of King Solomon's temple. And apparently it's been under a lot of police action, and they're digging underneath those buildings even today, trying to find something. They need to bring about a big event to take complete control of the Dome of the Rock. And apparently they're working at rebuilding the King Solomon facilities as we speak now, and so much more. I think even the Supreme Court building in Israel, you can go look up on the internet, has a lot of occult symbolism, pyramidal structures, and so much more. It's all tied together, what's going on. Even the Boston bombing at 666 Boylston Street, or the Sandy Hook school shooting, where one journalist held up a picture of an owl, and on the front of the dollar bill, perched on one of the ones, is an owl. You can go look it up. And the Egyptian symbols on the back with the pyramid and the eye. And we hear about Isis. Why is Isis's son Osiris, Horus, on the dollar bill, the symbol for the eye? And the obelisk for Osiris in our city squares. What's with this mystery religion? And it's in this book, Isis Unveiled. The name of this book, Isis Unveiled. And part of getting the degrees in Freemasonry is learning all these mythical stories, allegorical or whatever they want us to think, and learning some kind of spiritualism magic, communicating with some kind of other beings. Are they fallen angels? Page 392. In the East, this science is called in some places the 7 stories, storied, and in others the 9-storied temple. Every story answers allegorically to a degree of knowledge acquired. Moving on. Every story answers allegorically to a degree of knowledge acquired. So like I said, when you do join the Freemasonic Lodge and you go through the degrees, you learn all of these ancient stories, mythological or whatever, biblical. And that's how you acquire a degree and a degree and a degree. And apparently, even admitted by Albert Pike and others, they mislead people to say that it's all Christian, or if you're Arab, it's Quran, Muslim, or in India, it's Hindu. But when you reach a certain level, the 32nd degree, you are then told the truth. Nobody applies for the 33 degree. They have to nominate you for it. Throughout the countries of the Orient, wherever magic and wisdom religion are studied, that's what it says here, its practitioners and students are known among their craft as builders, for they build the temple of knowledge of secret science. Remember, I'm reading from Helena Blavatsky's book, Theophist Society, Isis Unveiled, Volume 2, and she admitted in her memoirs, Series 200, Part 1 and Part 2, and I need to read some more from that book, but it clearly, she describes in letters to her family and others, these beings that would manifest themselves in front of her. Her masters, who she was loyal to, dedicated her life to these beings, and they told her to write this book and gave her this information. And this book has hundreds, if not thousands, of different topics related to ancient history in the secret sciences, witchcraft, and so much more. Sorcery, the Jews, Egypt, Rome. So why did who and what were these beings, and why were they getting her to write on these topics and share it with the world? And they do talk negatively about Christianity, and apparently also other religions of the world. Look what they've done to the Middle East and the people who are Mohammedites of the Quran, Muslims in that religion. Look what they did in China with that revolution. Millions and millions were killed. Central, South America, American Indians. Same people were in charge of the planet, as it's said in this book. Those of the adepts, the people who are initiated, who are active, are styled practical or operative. Builders, while the students, or neophytes, are classed as speculative and theoretical. The former exemplify in works their control over the forces of inanimate. The former exemplify in works their control over the forces of the inanimate, as well as the animate nature. So forces inanimate, not physical. Witchcraft. The latter are but perfecting themselves in the rudiments of sacred science. Sacred science. Witchcraft. And again, I'm not opposed to knowledge, even spiritual magic. Even the shamans throughout thousands of years were healing people, were the tribe's doctors, etc. But when they try to keep the science of the control of nature away from the rest of us, to the point that they would kill people, masses amounts of people, destroy the Library of Alexandria, kill President John Kennedy. He said in his famous speech, go look it up if you haven't heard it, just put President John Kennedy's famous speech. Secret societies are repugnant to the American way of life. and I intend to expose them. And shortly thereafter, in Delaney's Plaza in Texas, Houston, Dallas, was it? It's a Freemasonic plaza, Delaney Plaza. He was assassinated. Their former exemplify in works their control over the forces of inanimate or as well as animate nature. The latter are but perfecting themselves in the rudiments of sacred science. These terms were evidently borrowed at the beginning by the unknown founders of the first Masonic guilds. In the now popular jargon, operative Masons, this is 1877 now, are understood to be the bricklayers and the handicraftsmen who composed the craft down to Sir Christopher Wren's time, and speculative Masons, all members of the order as now understood. The sentence attributed to Jesus, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it," disfigured as it is by mistranslation and misinterpretation, plainly indicates its real meaning. So is he saying here that the Freemasonic Lodge is attributed to the saying of Jesus, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it"? Are they saying this applies to the Freemasons? That they are the rock upon Jesus will build his church? I think not. I mean, even when Jesus overturned the money changers' tables, he did say to them, "Ye are of your father Satan." So I don't think he would have created Lucifer magazine. The Morning Star. You see the Lucifer program on TV on Monday nights? A lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. A lot of people are falling into the trap, thinking it's just entertainment. It's nothing. All those little 911 symbols on the Simpson cartoon, the Illuminati card games, and so much more. 20-something, 30-something years ago. Been a long time. When they came out with Pokemon chips. And now you walk downtown and people look like Pokemon. You think that was just an accident? Rockefeller telling Aaron Russo women's rights was to get the women out there in the workforce and get the children in the schools so they could control the children. They're after our minds. There's a battle for souls, apparently. We have shown the significance of Pater and Petra with the Hierophants. The interpretation traced on the table of stone of the final initiation was handed by the initiator to the chosen future interpreter. Having acquired himself with its mysterious contents, which revealed to him the mysteries of creation, the initiated became a builder himself, for he was made acquainted with the decohedron, or the geometrical figure on which the universe was built. So just imagine two pyramids made of quartz, complete pyramids, and then push them together so the 2 points go halfway through each other, and then you have something with like 8 or 9, 10 points. You can look up decohedron, Decahedron, and I did in the papers on my desk. I should have brought it with me. But it's a interesting, looks like a quartz rock, but it has a pyramid shape on the top and upside down, both of them meshed together with the edges sticking out. And apparently, even on that video I made about the Palladians and Barbara Marciniak, when you take a tetrahedron saying it wrong, the stone with the many different interlocking pyramids, and you spin it and hold it up, it apparently opens up your consciousness to be able to speak to these beings, and you can buy them online. But Barbara Mercenia, go watch my videos, the Bringers of the Dawn. Here we are connecting the dots. Bringers of the Dawn, the Light Bearer, the Morning Star, get it? Bringers of the Dawn, with the Palladians, and the Decohedron, the two interlocking pyramids. You can go see the picture of the geometrical figure on which the universe was built. So they're saying this decohedron, the two interlocking pyramids, was the basis of which the universe was built. To what he had learned in previous initiations of the use of the rule and of architectural principles was added a cross, the perpendicular and horizontal lines of which were supposed to form the foundation of the spiritual temple. So from what I'm reading here, would anybody argue with me that isn't Freemasonry and all these other brotherhood and lodges some kind of religion with creation? But to the profane public out there, they want to say, oh no, we're not a religious organization. But when you read this and you're using your intelligent mind and you're seeing what they're saying here, it is some kind of religion, philosophy, theology, teaching of creation. Even with the decohedron, we're supposed to form the foundation of the spiritual temple by placing them across the junction of a central primordial point. So the cross is supposed to be some kind of point of creation, the element of all existences, representing the first concrete idea of deity. Henceforth, he could not, as a master builder, see Corinthians 10, erect a temple of wisdom on that rock of Peter, for himself, and having laid a sure foundation, let another build therein. The Egyptian hierophant, the initiate, was given a square headdress. So if you look up the Egyptian hieroglyphics, the ancient images, and that's fascinating to go look that up. Just get on your computer and Egyptian hieroglyphics and look at some of those pictures. But some of them wear a square headdress, which he had to wear always, and a square. And a square, of course, is a Mason's mark, without which he could never go abroad. The perfect tau formed. The tau is a T with a circle on top. The T is supposed to stand for what it says right here, the deity. The T means just like a T, means divine. The circle, they have a serpent swallowing its tail, is supposed to be divine. So the circle on top of the T is the divine serpent, and they even have a picture of a serpent swallowing its tail on top of a T. A perfect tau, they call it a tau, T-A-U, formed of a perpendicular descending male ray. So the T is a perpendicular male ray, another unit for the phallic, or spirit, a horizontal line for the female ray. So the female ray, and then the T going into the female ray. That's another way they have it as allegorical. And the mundane circle, which was attribute of Isis. So the mundane circle was an attribute of Isis. The mundane circle is also a serpent eating its tail. So that's also a symbol for Isis. And then, of course, Isis's husband, Osiris, Horus was their son, has an obelisk in every downtown city square, which is a phallic unit. Connecting the dots continues. It is but at his death that the Egyptian cross was laid on the breast of his mummy. These square hats were worn unto this day by the Armenian priest. The claim that the cross is a purely Christian symbol, introduced after our era, is strange indeed when we find Ezekiel stamping the foreheads of the men of Judah. Here we go with the Judah, which is what Israel used to be called. Ancient Israel was called Judah. And they want to bring back the kingdom of Judah from the Euphrates River in Iraq down to the Egyptian Nile River, the ancient property lines of the old kingdom. And that's why they brought us 911, and they've been destroying all the countries in the Middle East. You can go look up on Yahoo image site Greater Israel and see the maps and the links to the websites that show you the details. It's readily available for anybody to verify. Greater Israel, just look it up on your computer. So we find Ezekiel stamping the foreheads of the men of Judah who feared the Lord, Ezekiel 4, with the signa thou, as it was translated in the Vulgate. In the ancient Hebrew, this sign was formed thus, but in the original Egyptian hieroglyphics, as a perfect Christian cross. So here's a couple pictures of the cross that they were using way back then, according to this book. And you can go look up the TAU. In previous videos, I've shown a picture show of them. In the revelation also of the Alpha and the Omega, spirit and matter. Alpha and Omega apparently means spirit and matter. So that would be the animate world and the inanimate world. That would be the physical world versus the invisible world. The first and the last stamps the name of his Father in the foreheads of the elect. And if our statements are wrong, if Jesus was not an initiate, a master builder, or a master mason, as it is now called, how comes it that on the most ancient cathedrals we find his figure with a mason's mark about his person? In the Cathedral of Santa Croce, Florence, over the main portal can be seen the figure of Christ holding a perfect square in his hand. Why do they want to destroy Christianity? Why does Helena Blavatsky say it's no longer needed? And all the channelers, too. You can go watch channeled material. Well, I thought I'd finish this video inside. My battery went dead on my camera outside, so I had to wait a while. So I'm just going to read the rest of this page. The surviving master builder of the operative craft of the true temple may go literally half naked and wander shipshod forever. So that's where they initiate somebody into masonry. They have to walk around half naked. Now, not for the sake of the puerile ceremony, but because, like the Son of Man, they have not where to lay their heads, and yet be the only surviving possessors of the Word. Their cable tow is the sacred triple cord of the certain Brahmas sannyasins, or the strings on which certain lamas hang their yeastone. But with these apparently valueless talisman, not one of them would part for all the wealth of Solomon and Sheba. The seven-knotted bamboo stick of the faker can become as powerful as the rod of Moses, which was created between the evenings, on which was engraven and set forth the great and glorious name with which he was to do the wonders of Mizraim. So apparently on Moses' rod there was engraved the name of God. What God? But anyways, it gave the rod a lot of power. And but these operative workmen have no fear that their secrets will be disclosed by treacherous high priest of chapters, though their generation may have received them through others than Moses. Solomon and Zerubbabel. Had Moses Michael Hayes, the Israelite brother who introduced the Royal Arch Masonry into this country in December 1778? Remember, I said December 21st is the winter solstice, also a witchcraft holiday. Had the prophetic presentment of future treasons, he might have instituted more efficacious obligations than he has. Truly, the Grand Omaneth Royal Arch Word, long lost but now found, has fulfilled its prophetic promise. The password of that degree is no more. I am that I am. It is now simply, I was, but I am no more. So there's just something else I wanted to conclude this video on, is apparently they had their own code or language. And here's a sample of it. The shapes with the dots in the middle. So the first grand chapter was instituted in Philadelphia, 1797. Next page here, it says, that we may not be accused of vain boasting, we shall give the keys to several of secret ciphers. So remember, there's these entities giving this information to Helena Blavatsky, of the most exclusive and important of the so-called higher Masonic degrees. If we mistake not, these have never before been revealed to the outside world, except that of the Royal Arch Masons in 1830, but have been most jealously guarded within the various orders. We are under neither promise, obligation, nor oath, and therefore violate no confidence. Our purpose is not to gratify the idle curiosity. We wish merely to show Masons and their affiliates of all other Western societies, the Company of Jesus included, that it is impossible for them to be secure in the possessions of any secrets than it is worth an Eastern Brotherhood's while to discover. It may also show them that if the latter can lift the mask of European societies, they are nevertheless successful in wearing their own visors. If any one thing is universally acknowledged, it is that the real secrets of not a single surviving ancient brotherhood are in the possession of the profane, the non-initiated, the non-illuminati, the non-illumined. Some of these ciphers were used by the Jesuits in their secret correspondences at the time of the Jacobin conspiracy, and when Masonry, an alleged successor to the Temple, was employed by the Church for political purposes. Fidel says that in the 18th century, the 1700s, besides the modern Knights Templars, we see the Jesuits, disfiguring the fair face of Freemasonry. Many Mason authors who were fully cognizant of the period and knew exactly all the incidences occurring, positively assert that then, and still later, the Jesuits exercised a pernicious influence, or at least endeavored to do so, upon the fraternity. Of the Rosicrucian order, he remarks, upon the authority of Professor Wong, that its aim at first was nothing less than the support and advancement of Catholics. When this religion manifested a determination entirely to repress liberty of thought, the Rosicrucians enlarged their designs, likewise to check, if possible, the progress of this widely spreading enlightenment. In the Sincerus Renutus, a truly converted of S. Reicher of Berlin, 1714, we note that laws were communicated for the government of the Golden Rosicrucians, which bear unmistakable evidences of Jesuitical intervention. We will begin with the cryptographs of the Sovereign Prince Rose Cross, also styled the Knights of the St. Andrew Knights of the Eagle and the Pelican, the Heirdom Rose Crucius, the Rosy Cross, Triple Cross, Perfect Brother, Prince Mason, and so on. The Heirdom Rosy Cross also claims a Templar origin in 1314. 1314. So all this seems to be connecting with some mystery religion involving the Temple of King Solomon, this ancient mystery religion, and information in the Old Testament. So apparently the people, these entities, divulging this information to Helena Blavatsky to put in this book to share with the public is some kind of disclosure of the cipher, the code that these lodges and brotherhoods and Rosicrucian and Mason Templars used. I'm not going to go into it, I'll just show the picture and try to conclude this video. What's in this book? So these are some of the ciphers and some of the interpretations. The Knights Kodash have another cipher, or rather hieroglyph, which in this case is taken from the Hebrew, possibly to be more in keeping with the biblical Kadashim of the temple. It's a note on the bottom here. Hebrew text and English, the former especially, in the degree of Kodash, so apparently there's a Kodash degree. The lecture is given upon the descent of Masonry through Moses. The descent of Masonry through Moses. Solomon, King Solomon, the Essenes, the Templar, Christian KK may get some light as to the kind of temple their ancestors would, in such a genealogical descent, have been attached to by consulting verse 13 of the same chapter as quoted above. 395. Two more pages here of these ciphers. The Jesuit cryptography. So the last piece I'll read here is 398. Let this suffice. We might, if we choose, give the cipher alphabets with their keys of another method of the Royal Arch Masons strongly resembling a certain Hindu character, the G and the L, of the mystic city, of a well-known form of the Devangiri script of the French sages, of the pyramids and the Sublime Master, of the great works, and others. But we refrain, only be it understood for the reason that some of these alone, of all the side branches of the original Blue Lodge Freemasonry, contain the promise of a useful future. As for the rest, they may and will go to the ash heap of time. High Masons will understand what we mean. So according to what's in this book, Isis Unveiled Volume 2, as dictated to Helena Blavatsky by some masters, some invisible, non-physical beings, to share with the world, what do you believe? And do you think these Freemasonic lodges and the obelisk in our city squares and them controlling the governments and the banking system, do you think it's benevolent? Do you think they're looking out for our interest? They obviously want a global world order. Do you think that's good for we the people? And from my research, apparently they want to depopulate the planet. And they're trying to bring about some great hoax, something called Project Bluebeam, a fake alien attack, bring us gray aliens, reptilians, an economic destruction, survivability, sustainability, Agenda 21, now called Agenda 2030. So who knows what's happening? In a picture in the paper today, or on the internet site I was just looking at, shows Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, with many world leaders all standing around him like they're ready to pounce on him and they're angry with him. So what is going on? And even President Donald Trump, go look up his mansion in New York City. He has a condo and it looks like a Freemasonic lodge. Doesn't take a genius to look at the pictures of his mansion and look at the lodges and his mansion and see that he must be a high-level priest or something. And apparently even Hillary Clinton was accused of going to Las Vegas to witches' conventions. And they were worried about her getting caught, according to some research I've seen. So she must be a high priestess. And that would all make sense. George Bush Jr., George Bush Sr. saying 1,000 points of light. The president's using the devil sign. A lot of famous people using the one-eyed sign. The 3-6 signs. So our world is surrounded by this material. And I really think we need to wake up and see where the information is coming from. And I will read more from the book of the memoirs of Helena Blavatsky and more from this book, because there's so much in this book that's just explosive. And where did the information come from? Like Helena Blavatsky said, some invisible beings. Okay, who are they? And what's their intent towards we the people? Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.